The moment Emily realized something was wrong came without drama, no shouting, no tears, just silence that felt heavier than noise. She sat in her car outside her home in a quiet suburb near Seattle, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly, unsure why she did not want to go inside. Inside that house was her life, her husband Mark, her routines, her safety. Mark was dependable, kind, the kind of man friends trusted and parents admired. He worked in project management, long hours, steady pay, predictable days. Emily once loved that stability, especially in the early years of their marriage. But 12 years had passed quickly, and somewhere along the way, warmth had turned into habit. Their mornings were quiet, their evenings filled with screens and schedules. They spoke kindly, never cruelly, yet rarely deeply. Emily could not remember the last time Mark asked how she felt instead of what she needed to do. She often blamed herself for feeling empty. After all, her life looked good from the outside, a clean home, supportive friends, holidays planned months ahead. Still, there was a restlessness inside her that refused to fade. She felt like a version of herself had been slowly fading, day by day, without anyone noticing. Emily worked part-time at a local library, a job she loved because it surrounded her with stories. Stories reminded her that life could be layered, emotional, unexpected. During quiet shifts, she sometimes imagined other paths she could have taken, other versions of herself who made braver choices. One afternoon, a flyer caught her attention. A community creative writing workshop held downtown, open to all experience levels. She hesitated before signing up, feeling foolish for wanting something just for herself. But something inside her whispered that she needed this, even if she did not know why. The first night of the workshop was crowded and awkward, folding chairs, nervous smiles, strangers holding notebooks. Emily almost left before it started, but she stayed, sitting near the back, listening. That was when she noticed Daniel, seated a few rows ahead. Daniel was not flashy or loud. He listened more than he spoke, nodded thoughtfully when others shared. When it was his turn to read, his voice was calm, his words honest, filled with quiet emotion. Emily felt an unexpected pull, not attraction at first, but recognition. After the session ended, people lingered in small groups, chatting politely. Daniel approached Emily, asking what she thought about the prompt. It was a simple question, but the way he waited for her answer felt different, like he truly cared to hear it. They talked for only a few minutes, about writing, about why they came, about nothing important at all. Daniel mentioned he had moved from Vancouver for work, adjusting to a new city, a new rhythm. Emily shared that she loved stories but rarely made time to write her own. When they said goodbye, Emily felt lighter, surprised by how meaningful such a brief exchange felt. Driving home, she replayed the conversation in her mind, embarrassed by how much it mattered to her. She told herself it was normal, that meeting new people could feel refreshing. Still, that night, she lay awake beside Mark, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of guilt and excitement. Over the next weeks, the workshop became the highlight of her routine. Emily dressed with more care on those evenings, something she barely noticed herself doing. Daniel always greeted her with warmth, never crossing boundaries, never pushing. They spoke about books, about moments that shaped them, about disappointments they rarely admitted out loud. With him, Emily felt heard, not fixed, not managed, just understood. It stirred emotions she had not felt in years, and that realization scared her. At home, Mark remained kind but distant, exhausted from work, grateful for calm evenings. Emily watched him closely, wondering how two people could love each other and still feel so far apart. She wanted to talk, to explain the emptiness, but she did not know how to begin. Instead, she smiled, nodded, kept peace. The distance between who she was and who she pretended to be kept growing. One rainy afternoon, after a workshop session ended early, Daniel suggested grabbing coffee nearby. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding, her mind racing through reasons to say no. But she said yes, convincing herself it was harmless. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, rain tapping against the windows. Conversation flowed easily, effortlessly. Daniel asked about her marriage, gently, without judgment. Emily surprised herself by answering honestly, though carefully. She spoke of routine, of comfort, of silence. Daniel did not interrupt, did not offer advice. He simply listened, and that listening felt intimate in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. When they parted ways, Emily knew something had shifted inside her. Nothing had happened, no rules broken, yet she felt as though she had stepped onto unfamiliar ground. That night, standing in her kitchen, staring at the dark window, Emily admitted a truth she had avoided for months. She was lonely, even within her marriage. And for the first time, she wondered if ignoring that loneliness had cost her more than she realized. As she turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Emily sensed that this small choice, attending a workshop, having a conversation, had opened a door she was not sure she could close. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that the quiet cracks in her life were about to widen, whether she was ready or not. After the first few weeks of the workshop, Emily and Daniel found themselves talking more often. At first, it was only after class, exchanging thoughts about writing prompts, sharing small observations. But soon, those conversations began to extend beyond the workshop, short texts, emails, and casual chats about life. Emily told herself it was innocent, a friendship, a connection sparked by creativity and mutual understanding. They started meeting in public places outside class, a quiet cafe on a rainy afternoon, a bookstore browsing session, a small park bench under the sun. With Daniel, Emily discovered a space where she could speak freely without judgment, where her thoughts were taken seriously. He remembered small details she mentioned, questions she had, even her favorite books, and that attention made her feel seen in ways she had forgotten. At home, life with Mark continued its quiet rhythm, predictable and safe. Mark cared deeply, yet he rarely noticed the small signs of Emily's growing restlessness. He trusted her, assumed she was happy, and Emily herself struggled to admit the truth. Her emotional attachment to Daniel grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, yet it became a pulse she could not ignore. Emily began to notice the contrast in her life, the two halves that rarely intersected. With Mark, she felt comfort and reliability, the warmth of shared years, the history of a life built together. With Daniel, she felt excitement and possibility, an emotional awakening, the thrill of rediscovery. She did not seek to replace her husband, yet she could not deny that Daniel stirred something long dormant. One afternoon, Daniel asked about her dreams, not her responsibilities, not the routines that shaped her days. Emily talked about stories she had wanted to write, places she had wanted to visit, experiences she had never tried. Daniel listened attentively, occasionally offering insight, sometimes just nodding. In that space, Emily felt understood, validated, and alive. Her visits home after these meetings were heavy with silence. Mark asked questions, small ones, about her day, about work, about dinner. Emily smiled, answered politely, but a part of her remained elsewhere, still with Daniel, still in that world of conversation and shared reflection. She hated herself for feeling divided, yet could not undo the emotional pull that had taken hold. As weeks passed, Emily's awareness of the line she was crossing grew. It was not physical, there were no kisses, no intimacy beyond conversation. Yet the emotional connection felt intimate, and that closeness weighed heavily on her conscience. Guilt crept in during quiet moments, when she saw Mark reading in the living room or fixing a meal with care. She wondered if she had betrayed him simply by feeling alive with someone else. Emily tried to create distance, telling Daniel she needed space, needing to remind herself of boundaries. But each pause in contact only made her heart ache, made her realize how deeply she had leaned on his attention. She was not looking for adventure or thrill, she was searching for recognition, for being truly seen. And Daniel gave her that without question, without expectation, without judgment. The tension built slowly, unspoken yet powerful. Daniel eventually admitted that he cared for her, his voice quiet and honest. Emily froze, her mind racing through emotions she could barely name. She could not speak immediately, her heart heavy with guilt, longing, fear, and something else she did not yet understand. That night, Emily lay in bed beside Mark, staring at the ceiling. The silence between them felt different now, sharper, more meaningful. She wondered if Mark would ever know the storm inside her, the part of her soul that had awakened unexpectedly. She realized that trying something new, seeking connection, had shifted her life in ways she could not contain. She knew decisions had to be made, and yet, she hesitated, afraid of hurting those she loved. The emotional intimacy she shared with Daniel had become addictive in a quiet, almost invisible way. Each thought of him, each recollection of their conversations, left her heart pounding. She loved Mark, or at least the life they had built, yet she could not ignore the pull of what she felt with Daniel. Emily's inner conflict grew, a mix of excitement, guilt, longing, and fear. She found herself drifting during mundane tasks, thinking about their talks, the way he listened, the way he smiled when she shared something meaningful. It was a quiet obsession, not physical, but emotional, consuming her attention and energy. She began to notice herself laughing more freely, feeling lighter after their conversations, yet simultaneously sinking into guilt when she returned home. Mark, unaware of the storm brewing in Emily's heart, continued his routine. He praised her efforts at home, made small gestures of care. Emily wanted to respond fully, to be fully present, but a part of her had already been claimed by the emotional bond she shared with Daniel. She struggled to reconcile her love for Mark with the awakening she felt with Daniel. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon when Emily and Daniel met at the cafe after class. The conversation shifted from writing to life itself, to hopes and regrets. Daniel asked her if she was happy, not superficially, but in the deepest sense. Emily hesitated, knowing the answer would define what came next. Her silence hung between them, heavy with truth and possibility. Emily realized she could no longer ignore the depth of what she felt. Something inside her had shifted irreversibly. She knew she was standing at a crossroads. Continuing as if nothing had changed was no longer an option. For days afterward, Emily reflected on her emotions, trying to understand what they meant. She did not want to hurt Mark, yet she could not lie to herself. Her heart had been stirred awake by connection, attention, and understanding she had lacked for years. Daniel had not asked for more than honesty, yet the bond itself felt transformative. Emily understood the danger of emotional infidelity, yet she also realized that it was showing her what she truly needed. Her life with Mark was comfortable and secure, but lacking the depth she craved. The emotional intimacy with Daniel illuminated a part of herself she had almost forgotten. She had to make choices, not to escape, but to confront her own needs and desires. The chapter closed with Emily sitting in the quiet of her living room, rain tapping against the windows. Mark watched TV, absorbed in his routine, unaware of the storm inside her. Emily held a mug of coffee, hands trembling slightly. She knew she could not continue as before, that she had to face her emotions, and that the path ahead would challenge her in ways she had never imagined. Her heart was split, her mind restless, but a small spark of clarity had emerged. Trying something new had awakened her. The journey was far from over, but Emily understood that acknowledging the truth was the only way to begin healing. She had crossed an invisible line, and now the real test was how she would handle it. The quiet cracks in her life had widened, and there was no going back. Emily could no longer ignore the storm inside her, the emotional attachment that had grown quietly but powerfully. She knew that pretending everything was fine would only make the cracks wider. For days, she wrestled with her thoughts, pacing the kitchen late at night, staring out the window at the dark streets, thinking about Mark, thinking about Daniel, thinking about herself. Every option seemed heavy with consequence, every decision filled with fear and uncertainty. Finally, Emily understood that honesty was the only path forward. She could not erase the feelings she had experienced, but she could face them, acknowledge them, and take responsibility. One evening, she sat across from Mark at the dining table, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Her hands trembled as she spoke, voice soft but steady. She told Mark about Daniel, about the conversations that had opened something inside her. She did not try to justify what had happened, she did not hide the truth. She explained the loneliness she had felt in their marriage, the parts of herself she had lost in the routine of life. Mark listened, his expression a mix of shock, hurt, and confusion. The silence between them grew heavy, each word hanging in the air like fragile glass. Mark did not yell, he did not storm out. He simply sat and absorbed the truth, the betrayal, the love, and the hurt. For hours, they spoke in fragments, sometimes words, sometimes silence. Emily watched him closely, wishing she could take away the pain, wishing she had known how to prevent it. But she also knew that hiding the truth had only made her feel smaller, weaker, less alive. In the following days, life felt different, like walking on uneven ground. Mark went to work, came home, and they tried to resume normal routines. But Emily noticed subtle shifts, his patience fraying in small ways, her own guilt gnawed at her constantly. They began counseling, sessions with a professional who could guide them through conversations they could not navigate alone. The counselor encouraged honesty, reflection, and patience. Emily found herself expressing feelings she had never shared before. Mark, though hurt, listened, asked questions, and began to reveal his own vulnerabilities, fears, and disappointments. Emily also made a decision about Daniel, knowing that emotional closeness could never continue without causing further harm. She ended their meetings, not with anger, not with resentment, but with gratitude. Daniel had shown her what she was missing in her life, had reminded her that she deserved attention, respect, and emotional intimacy. The ending was difficult, a quiet ache in her chest, but necessary. She realized that this connection, though brief, had awakened her, and that awakening could now be channeled into her marriage, if they were both willing to work. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Mark began rebuilding, not just for appearances, but for understanding. They took long walks together, spoke about dreams, fears, and memories. Emily shared thoughts she had hidden for years, and Mark responded with care, sometimes awkward, sometimes hesitant. But each attempt brought them closer, slowly and steadily. They rediscovered laughter, small touches, and moments of warmth that had faded under routine. Emily felt herself becoming whole again, not by denying her feelings, but by using them to confront truth. There were still nights when guilt surfaced, moments when she remembered Daniel and the ease of connection they shared. But those memories became reminders, not temptations. They reminded Emily that she could not be passive in her life, that she had to speak, act, and claim her own happiness responsibly. Mark noticed the change too, the spark returning to her eyes, the energy she had carried with her during her meetings with Daniel. He realized that confronting the issue, rather than ignoring it, had sparked something in both of them. Emily also began writing again, something she had abandoned years ago. Her notebooks filled with stories, reflections, and letters she would never send. Writing became a safe space, a mirror to her emotions, a bridge between her past self and the person she was becoming. Daniel's role in her life faded into memory, a teacher who had sparked change without demanding presence. She learned to hold appreciation without longing, and lessons without attachment. Mark and Emily's marriage did not become perfect overnight, and they knew it would never be flawless. But it became real, honest, and alive, a living thing that required care, patience, and courage. Emily understood that transformation often comes through discomfort, through mistakes, and through facing hard truths. She no longer feared her emotions, her desires, or her mistakes, because they had guided her toward clarity. The cost had been emotional turmoil, fractured trust, and painful self-reflection. Yet the reward was deeper understanding, authentic connection, and renewed intimacy. Months later, Emily sat in the same kitchen where she had first felt restless. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and steady. She held her coffee, not cold this time, feeling present, grounded, alive. Mark was nearby, reading the newspaper, and they shared a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had faced. The silence between them was no longer heavy, but comfortable, filled with understanding, patience, and a shared journey. Emily knew the past could never be erased, that mistakes would always be part of her story. Yet she also knew that trying something new had not ruined her life, it had awakened it. The workshop, the conversations, the emotional connection, had forced her to confront the truth. And that confrontation had transformed her, not by taking love away, but by teaching her how to truly hold it. She reflected on the lessons learned, understanding that growth required risk, honesty, and courage. Trying something new had revealed what was missing, shown her the depth of her feelings, and opened her heart to real change. Emily understood that love, even when shaken, could survive if nourished with truth, care, and commitment. She felt a quiet pride in herself, a sense of agency she had lost in routine. Her life was no longer passive, and her marriage, though challenged, had become a choice, a conscious effort, a partnership renewed. Evenings now carried soft conversations, shared laughter, and moments of connection Emily had thought she had lost forever. The spark that had awakened inside her with Daniel was redirected into her life with Mark, not as a secret or temptation, but as insight. She learned to honor her emotions without letting them control her, to recognize desire without sacrificing what she valued most. And in this way, her life transformed, quietly but profoundly, a testament to courage, honesty, and emotional awakening. Emily finally understood that change does not come from avoidance, comfort, or denial. It comes from facing the truth, even when it hurts, even when it shakes the foundations of a familiar life. Her journey had been painful, filled with longing, heartbreak, and reflection. But it had also been beautiful, full of growth, insight, and the kind of emotional depth that transforms ordinary lives into meaningful stories. In the end, Emily realized that transformation is not about escape or passion. It is about awakening, understanding, and acting with honesty. She had faced herself, faced her marriage, faced her mistakes, and in doing so, she had found a deeper, truer love. The life she once thought was quiet and incomplete had become rich, honest, and alive. And though the journey had cost her comfort and certainty, it gave her something far more valuable, the courage to truly live,